welcome. I'm Asuma Katauka and you're watching the NewsX Eurozone. Let's take a look at the top headlines of this hour. Ukraine has launched a massive drone offensive targeting Russian energy and industrial infrastructure with 100 drones destroyed over 12 regions including Moscow and Crimea. This is according to the Russian Defense Ministry. The strikes, which set fuel storage facilities ablaze in Russia, this marks the third consecutive night of attacks on Russia. The United States will reduce its military presence in Europe by suspending the rotation of a combat brigade deployed across several NATO countries, according to Romania's defense ministry. The move comes as Washington reassesses its force posture on NATO's eastern flank. Spain will hold a state memorial in Valencia today to honor over 230 victims of last year's deadly floods, with King Felipe VI, Prime Minister Pedro Sanchez and regional leader Carlos Mazin in attendance. The tragedy, Spain's worst flood in a generation, has left 237 dead, destroyed 130,000 vehicles, and generated 800,000 tons of debris. While outrage persists over Mazin's delayed emergency response and ongoing judicial probes into this disaster. The Netherlands has held a snap election seen as a crucial test for Europe's far right, with Geert Wilders' anti-immigration freedom party known as PVV running with 3 other parties, while over 50% of voters remain undecided. However, all mainstream parties have ruled out forming a coalition with Wilders amid growing polarization over immigration and housing. France is set to adopt a consent-based rape law, defining rape as any non-consensual act after the National Assembly approved the bill by 155 votes to 31 votes. The reform, praised by Amnesty International, France, and women's rights groups, marks a historic shift aligning France with countries like Germany, Spain, and Sweden. Belgium has launched an investigation after 2 drone sightings over a military base, according to Defense Minister Theo Franken. The incident spotted drones on Sunday and Tuesday last week. This marks the second such case in less than a month, prompting a joint probe by police and intelligence agency. Polish fighter jets intercepted a Russian Il-20 reconnaissance aircraft flying over the Baltic Sea without a flight plan or transponder. As the Polish military army confirms the reports, the incident comes amid heightened tensions on NATO's eastern flank, following Russian airspace violations in Estonia and Poland, which Russia denies. Israel has reinstated the Gaza ceasefire after carrying out a wave of airstrikes that has killed over 100 people and targeted dozens of militant sites, according to the Israeli Defense Forces. The IDF has also claimed that its strikes eliminated 30 militant commanders in Gaza, while local hospitals and civil defense has reported heavy civilian casualties, including 35 children, according to Gaza's health ministry. Now we start with Russia and Ukraine. According to reports, Russia has claimed that its forces have captured the village of Vishnivi in Ukraine's Dnipropetrovsk region. Overnight, Russian attacks hit several Ukrainian regions, damaging power and transport infrastructure. Separately, Ukrainian army strikes 2 oil depots in Crimea. In Odessa, 1 energy worker was injured and nearly 30,000 homes lost electricity. Crews are scrambling to restore power while generators keep critical facilities still running. Strikes were also reported in Chernihiv and the Kharkiv region, where drones hit industrial sites and residential areas, injuring civilians. Meanwhile, Ukraine's Air Force says that Russia has launched more than 120 drones since Tuesday night, with most intercepted but dozens still hitting targets across the country. Now for this discussion, we welcome Glenn Grant. He's a former advisor to Defense Minister of Ukraine, joins us live from Riga. Thank you very much, Glenn, for joining us again. Good to see you. Glenn, to what extent, looking at all this news, to what extent should each side, Russia and Ukraine, be held responsible for current pause in peace talks and current attacks on energy infrastructure on both sides, as we know that both regions are severely cold regions, especially in this time approaching winter or winter already?
Well, there's a very simple answer to that, and that is that the only side that should be responsible is Russia, because they started the invasion. The simple line to all this is that, of course, if Russia stops fighting, the war ends. If Ukraine stops fighting, Ukraine ends, and Russia wins. So Ukrainians have no choice but to carry on doing what they're doing. Russia has plenty of choice. It can stop and go home. And all the things you've been talking about, and you've talked about a lot that is going on, really are just a summary of a normal day now in this war, with attacks on both sides, deaths on both sides, and Russia slowly creeping forward on the front line. But I would take any claims by Russia on the front line with a pinch of salt until we actually hear from the neutral observers that this has actually taken place. So I don't believe anything until I've heard it from other sources.
And Glenn, when you say neutral observers, which countries are you hinting to?
Well, I'm not hinting at any particular country, because there are a lot of people who are using satellite data from online, neutral satellite data that they're buying, and then actually checking what's going on, and then checking with their own sources on both sides that how the war is going. So there are quite a few analysts doing this around the world, and so you actually have to wait till these people speak and say that we've seen the videos, we've seen the satellite photographs, and we agree that this is what is happening.
Sorry about that. And do you think there are any international mediators that could play as a mediator right now?
No, I don't think so. I don't think anybody's got the strength between both countries to actually do something. Although, I mean, Ukraine has said it's willing to go almost anywhere except Russia and Belarus, which is quite understandable. But I don't see that there's any mediation going to happen, because Russia is just pushing forward, and Putin thinks he's doing very well. Thank you. I mean, he's got Trump in his pocket. He's got got Hungarians, Czechs, and Slovakians now all doing things for him. So I can't see he's going to want to stop, and Zelensky hasn't got any choice. He cannot stop.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Glenn, for sharing that insight. Please stay with us as we come back to you. And now we stay on this topic. Poland has said that its fighter jets have intercepted a Russian reconnaissance aircraft flying over the Baltic Sea. The Polish army has said that the Il-20 was in international airspace with no flight plan and its transponder switched off, a serious breach of aviation safety. But officials stress there was no violation of Polish airspace. The interception comes as NATO's eastern flank remains on edge after Russian jets entered Estonia's airspace in September and more than 20 Russian drones crossed into Poland. Poland has said that it remains fully alert to protect its borders. Separately, top U.S. force commander also says Russia may have been deterred by NATO's recent strong response, but warns Moscow is likely to keep testing alliance defenses. Now, for this discussion, we welcome back Glenn Grant. He's a former advisor to Defense Minister of Ukraine, joins us live from Riga. Thank you very much, Glenn, for staying with us.
You.
Glenn, can you tell us what is this particular this aircraft that was intercepted, and do you think this could be happening more often now?
First of all, it's a normal surveillance aircraft. But I don't think people realize that Russia has been doing this solidly since even before the year 2000. When I was working in Estonia in 1998, Russia was flying aircraft down to Kaliningrad and back again with transponders turned off, and frequently cut across Estonian airspace. And they've flown into Latvia, they've flown into Lithuania, and of course, now we see another one close to Poland. This is normal, it's their daily occurrence, and they are flying, most of their aircraft are flying with transponders turned off. It's just that not always does NATO or a NATO country react to this, but it depends where they are and what the aircraft is. If they think they're looking for something specifically, then the air policing, which is based in one of the 3 Baltic states, lifts off and flies and then escorts the aircraft out of NATO airspace. When it's flying down the center of the Baltic Sea, then it's not in NATO airspace. So it basically can do what it likes. But transponders turned off is dangerous because there are civil aircraft flying up and down there as well.
Yes, and also bringing U.S. to this conversation, we saw that U.S. is retrieving its troops from NATO's eastern flank. What do you think, why is U.S. doing this, and especially why do you think it is doing it now that it seems like they are more needed over there in those areas?
Well, I mean, Trump, as you know, has been supporting Putin since his first period in office. And this is actually a little bit of a battle between America being America and playing their own game and trying to set, you might say, save money, and NATO, who actually want the US air troops. And of course, NATO is not just US, it's all the countries. So there will be backroom discussions between NATO leaders and the Americans about how many troops are kept in Europe and where they're kept. At the moment, there's not a lot of them. I mean, nothing like there used to be. And what they are doing is rotating troops. So sometimes when troops are rotated, people think they're leaving, but in fact, new ones come, or different things come. So an infantry company may leave, but helicopters come instead. So one's got to be very careful about looking for some deep meaning in this, when in fact it's often just cost cutting and trying to save money or to not overstretch the troops that they've got.
Right. Thank you for clarifying that. We're always a pleasure talking to you. Thank you very much, Glenn Grant, for joining us today and sharing that insight. Now we stay in the region. The Netherlands goes to the polls today for a snap election, which is widely seen as a test of far-right influence across Europe. This election follows the collapse of the ruling coalition after a dispute over immigration policy. Anti-immigration politician Geert Wilders and his Freedom Party, or PVV, are narrowly leading in opinion polls, but half of Dutch voters still remain undecided, making the outcome too close to call. Meanwhile, mainstream parties have ruled out forming a coalition with Wilders, following his role in bringing down the previous government. It is important to note that under the Dutch system, no single party can govern alone, which makes coalition talks crucial in the days ahead. Speaking about the elections, Dutch D66 party leader Rob Jetten has said that his party is focused on delivering results on housing and climate policy, while also restoring the Netherlands' role at the heart of Europe. Let's listen in.
D66, my party, has run a very positive campaign because we want to get rid of all the negativism in the Netherlands for over the past few years. We can build a bridge between different groups in our parliament to show voters in the Netherlands that we can deliver on important topics such as housing, migration and more climate action. But also I want to bring back the Netherlands in the heart of Europe, because without European cooperation...
The D66 party leader has further added that Dutch politics must confront populism directly and hold leaders accountable for their records. He's also confident that his party can counter the far right in this election. Meanwhile, Freedom Party leader Geert Wilders is also optimistic, saying that he hopes the results will favor his party as Dutch voters head to the polls. Let's listen in.
Well, you know, the voters are in charge. The bigger we will become, the more easier that will be. But today it's voting day, tomorrow it's politician day, so we will see. But I hope it will be a good outcome.
Now for this discussion, we welcome Sander van Hoorn. He's a former EU correspondent, joins us live from Amsterdam. Thank you very much for joining us today. Welcome to NewsX World. Sander, what more can you tell us about this a particular individual? I don't know if I'm pronouncing it correctly, but Geert Wilders.
Well, the correct pronunciation, I guess you have to be Dutch. It's Geert Wilders, okay. Geert with a sharp G. He is a far-right politician that has been a member of parliament for almost 2 decades. He is originally a spin-off of the Liberal Party, VVD, who is also running in this election. And he has been riding an anti-immigrant, anti-Muslim, anti-migration ticket for the past elections. And he has won the previous elections. So that would make him a likely prime minister, but that was a no-go for the other parties that he had to form a coalition with. So he's trying to run again, to become the biggest, to become inevitable, because he wants to be the Dutch prime minister.
And without a coalition, how can he? Is there any other party or other party forming that can make it happen? What do you think could increase his chances?
There are parties that don't rule him out. Those are the more far-right parties, but also some of the bigger parties have not ruled out joining his government. But that will not get him a majority in parliament based on the recent opinion polls. What would bring him a majority in parliament is cooperation with the centrist parties, but those are the ones that ruled out joining his coalition. So that would make it extremely difficult, if not impossible, for him to become prime minister. So even if he wins these elections again, if his party becomes the biggest, it's more likely that other parties will try to form a coalition government without him.
And then does that stop him from becoming a prime minister?
That would stop him from becoming a prime minister. But polls of the election offices have been open now for a couple of hours. They will close at 9 o'clock Dutch time tonight, so that is in a little over 9 hours. A lot still can happen. His party might not even win the elections. There's several runners-up, the Christian Democrats, the left-leaning Socialist Greens, and you just heard him, Rob Jetten of the centrist D66 party. They all can become the biggest in these elections. And if you look at the most recent opinion polls, and you count into effect that there's a margin in those polls, it's really too close to call now, and it may even be too close to call once the polling stations close and the first exit polls will emerge at 9 o'clock p.m. tonight, Dutch time. So these are really exciting elections, and that's when you look at the turnout, which may or may not benefit Geert Wilders. Turnout so far is a little bit lower than in last elections, and the analysis is that that might actually hurt Geert Wilders.
And what do you think, what would he do if he could not become a prime minister?
That's an interesting question. He has said that if he does not become the prime minister when his party wins the elections, then that is a failure of democracy. And that has been blasted by other parties saying, like, democracy is getting the majority of the seats in parliament. And if another coalition can do that, that is democracy. And that is why some people worry that Geert Wilders, in the end, is not a democratic force in Dutch politics, because he has been talking about, for example, cancelling EU treaties. He has talked about singling out certain groups of immigrants. And that is why a lot of the other parties are calling him anti-democratic. And that is exactly the reason why some of those centrist parties have ruled out governing with him. Added, of course, to the fact that they blame him for walking out of the last government, effectively turning the Dutch politics into 2 years of turmoil, in 2 years of actually non-government. They blame Geert Wilders for that.
And lastly, what challenges does Dutch coalition system pose for forming a government after this election?
Well, the problem is, if you run for elections, you want to make clear where you stand. So their differences are being exaggerated. And the day after the election, you have to form a coalition government. And that's why you have to compromise, where you have to tell basically the people that voted for you that you cannot gain everything you promised. Now, there's actually one of the people that may win the elections of the Christian Democrats Party who says, that is exactly what I do. I don't promise too much, because people know, Dutch people know, that the day after the elections, you just cannot keep all your promises. And that is something that he is hoping for, that people will distance themselves from the populist view that you can just promise anything, knowing that you will not be able to deliver. So we will have to see whether Geert Wilders' populist party will get the most vote, or people in Holland will shift back to the center. And that is something that is anxiously awaited also, for example, in the rest of Europe, because they face, each country in their own way, of course, the same problem, like a rising populist trend, centrist parties that try to cope with that. If the centrist parties in Holland may cope with that, that may be a signal for other countries in Europe. So this election here in this tiny country called the Netherlands is being closely watched elsewhere in Europe.
Yes, we will also be following it. Thank you very much for that insight, Sander Van Hoorn. Please stay with us as we come back to you for our next discussion as well. Now, we stay in the region. The United States is set to withdraw some troops from NATO's eastern flank, including from bases in Romania. Romania has confirmed that it has been notified of Washington's decision to reduce the number of soldiers deployed in the region. The move also includes the U.S. forces that were to be stationed at the Romanian Mihail Kogalnicianu air base. Briefing further on the matter, Romania's defense ministry has said that the change involves halting the rotation of U.S. brigade that had elements in several NATO countries. The ministry has also added that the decision by the U.S. was expected, given current shifts in its security priorities. Let's listen in.
Am avut întâlnirea miniștrilor NATO la Bruxelles. Pete Hegseth, secretarul de stat american al apărării, a transmis încă o dată partenerilor europeni că acum că și-au consolidat europenii poziția pe flancul de est și în general în Europa și au agreat că se vor înarma mai bine, vor da mai multă atenție proprii apărări, Statele Unite se vor uita mai mult către Indo-Pacific. Discutăm, deci este bine să avem mai mulți militari. Totul depinde de discuțiile care se întâmplă și ieri m-am auzit cu comisarul Kubilius ieri după amiază. Suntem în legătură.
The move comes as U.S. President Trump's administration urges European allies to take greater responsibility for their own defense, as Washington chooses to focus more on its borders and the Indo-Pacific region. Now, this U.S. decision to cut troops in Romania has drawn attention amid ongoing war in Ukraine and concerns about security in Eastern Europe. Meanwhile, a NATO official has responded to these developments, saying that such adjustments to U.S. force posture are not very unusual. The official has also confirmed that NATO was informed in advance and has stressed that Washington's presence in Europe remains larger than it has been in many recent years. Now, for this discussion, we welcome back Sander van Hoorn. He's a former EU correspondent, joins us live from Amsterdam. Thank you very much, Sander, for staying with us. Now, what's your analysis to this situation, especially given the fact that, EU is seeing a lot of airspace violation, and also Ukraine and Russia is still in war. What's your analysis?
Well, of course, you're right that especially now there's been another Russian fighter jet that was flying without its transponder switched on. Instances like these, and then the scaling back of American troops on an air base on the eastern flank of the EU, that is worrying some people. However, the US have not announced how many people will actually be withdrawn from that air base, and a lot of US troops will remain there. And you have to remember that when Russia violates or may violate EU airspace, most of the times it's European aircraft that scramble to intercept airplanes or drones. So this will not, I think, effectively weaken the eastern flank of the NATO territory, the European countries situated there. But it is a signal that have some people worried.
And to what extent do you think that this will have effect on Romanian perception of its security within NATO?
It depends to the extent that US troops will pull back there. A lot of them remain. And it will also be looking towards NATO to fill eventual gaps that the Americans may leave. And I think European countries will be eager to fill any gaps that may arise, because I think the defense of the eastern border of NATO, of the EU, which is more or less the same border in this respect, that is a priority that is being viewed as such by many European countries. If you take, for example, the Netherlands, where elections are held today, opinions about anything differ widely, except for the fact that defense spending needs to be raised up to the norms that NATO set for that. And you see that in many more European countries where defense spending is actually on the rise. And that is, of course, because Donald Trump has said that more European money needs to be spent on defense. That is a view that he shares with many European leaders that maybe have been shaken awake by him, but are rising up to the occasion. And I think that will be seen in Romania as well, where any gaps left by the Americans will quickly be filled by European countries.
Right, and thank you for connecting it to our previous discussion as well, Sander. And how might this troop withdrawal impact broader transatlantic relations and confidence on U.S.'s role in NATO and U.S.'s posture towards Europe's defense cooperation?
Well, you've got incidents and trends. And if you call this an incident, a single announcement made by the US concerning the number of troops, the number of money being spent in Europe, that's an incident, and that may worry some. I talked about the fact that it is a reduction of troops on an air base where the airspace has been violated by Russia many times. So that may be worrying, but the trend has been known. The trend that US will pull back some of its troops from Europe, that the US expects Europe to spend more on its own defense. That has been a trend for a while now. And you see European politicians, countries, but also the EU scramble to rise up to this occasion. So I think the trend is not surprising. This incident may surprise some.
Right. With that, I would like to thank Sander van Hoorn for joining us all the way from Amsterdam and sharing that insight. Thank you very much. Now we stay in Europe. A migrant sex offender who was mistakenly released from prison has now been deported back to Ethiopia from the United Kingdom and will not be allowed to return. Hadush Kebatu who sexually assaulted a 14-year-old girl and a woman in Epping, Essex, was accidentally freed by prison staff last Friday. Police launched a two-day manhunt and arrested him in North London before he was put on a flight to Ethiopia on Tuesday night. Home Secretary Shabana Mahmood calls the mistake unacceptable and says every effort was made to get Kebatu off British soil. United Kingdom's Deputy Prime Minister and Justice Secretary David Lammy calls it a human error. The Home Office has launched an independent inquiry led by Dame Lynn Owens to look at prison procedures and make sure this does not happen again. Stricter checks are now in place for offenders leaving custody. Local MPs and residents say they are relieved and want stronger oversight of this system. And that's a wrap on the NewsX Eurozone. Keep watching NewsX World for more news updates from around the world.